iHeartRadio presents Podversations, a weekly discussion with the biggest names and influencers in podcasting.
Hey, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us again for this week's installment of the iHeartPodcast Network Speaker Series. This is my favorite part of the week where I get to take a break and sort of stop down with one of our creators, one of our partners that we have been introduced to usually through the medium of podcasting, but it gives us a chance to talk to someone out there in the world of creators and creativity about what motivates them, why they're doing this, why they chose podcasting as at least one of the things that they do. We've had incredible conversations as part of this series, and I think this week will be no different. I am incredibly honored to welcome Jill Scott to this week's session. Thank you so much for hanging out with us for half hour.
Hi, Conal. Thank you so much for having me. This is nice.
So listen, part of what I love about podcasting is that I actually don't know anyone in this medium yet that started out as a podcaster. Everyone has come, because it's a newer medium, it's hit mass reach already as a medium. You got almost 120 million Americans a month listening to podcasts, but it still feels newish. And so a lot of the creators in podcasting came from other mediums. You in particular, you come from primarily the world of music, but I want to try to go way back. Was there a moment for you as a little girl, maybe in high school, maybe in college, I don't know, when it sparked that I'm a creator, this is what I'm going to do?
I'm sure that there was, but it was a very, very slow process for me. I won't say that I was shy, but I'll say that I owned it. It was mine. You know, whatever creativity I had, if it was singing a song or writing a poem or anything, it belonged to me. And my worry was that somebody was going to take it and ruin it, or they would have an opinion that would hurt it, you know, or stop me from doing something that I really enjoyed doing. And so I kept it to myself for as long as I could, you know, whether, you know, whatever it was, I was singing or writing or acting, you know, I just kept it to myself.
What did it feel like when you had to start giving it over to other people? When you know, a huge part of the mediums that you've chosen to work in, music is an easy example. I mean, music is, it can only be private for so long. At some point you have to work with writers and producers and distributors and
yes,
and tour managers. Is that, as a musician that's just done incredible work again and again and again,
thank you,
is that a bumpy process where you're like moving work out into the world from the quiet of your own home when you write a new song or imagine a new song out into the broader world? How does that work for someone like you?
Well, I was doing so much of the one thing, you know, I was doing so much of poetry, and the poetry led me to singing. When other artists came along and said, hey, do you write hooks? I lied. I'd never written a hook. I said, yes, I do. And they said, okay. I had no idea what 4 bars were, let alone 8 or 16, no idea. So I just listened, and it made sense that the music would stop there. So I stopped there, you know, and it worked out. It just continued to work out. Someone asked me, well, do you act? I was like, yeah, all the time, you know, but to me, I had, because I had been in the mirror practicing how to cry and, you know, reliving a moment from Dynasty or something, you know, so, or some days of our lives. So the transition was really scary because I had no idea what I was doing on any level at all. But I've been like a faith-driven person. And I'm, you know, I also believe that when opportunity knocks, open the door, you know, so it's been that kind of existence. I've been like led by energy and faith like my entire life. And I'm really glad that I kept it to myself, you know, my talents to myself for as long as I did, because I feel like I got a chance to nurture them and fall in love, before it became a job.
Right.
Yeah, that's the scary part, when what you love becomes a job. And
yeah, it's definitely, I can imagine that. It's definitely odd to go from, I imagine, and maybe I'm imagining too much, but I imagine a young girl experimenting with poetry, and now it's your day job. Weird way to put it, but is that, I imagine there's a lot of pride in that, but also a lot of constraints and rigor now that you have to bring to the job, that you're like, oh, I can't. How do you reconnect with that young girl writing poetry to keep it real, maybe, to put it one way? Is that a struggle?
I give myself a whole break. I just give myself breaks. I take walks. I sit under trees. I hug them. I talk to animals. I make fun of kids, like in Target,
Specifically in Target.
Well, yeah. I mean, this Target is one of my favorite places. Get my little coffee and put on some earbuds. I'm in there. So make fun of kids in Target. I do the things that remind me of simplicity.
Yeah.
And humanity. Just real simple stuff. I love to talk to strangers about the weather. Hot day, huh? I can't wait to find out, what they're gonna say to me. Yeah, yesterday I was at the doctor's office, and I'm like, it's all so exciting. Those are the things that keep me creative. And when I don't have enough of that, I know it's time for me to take a break.
Yeah.
Yeah, retreat back into very, very simple, lovely things. Helps so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about way back to the beginning? Why did you start even experimenting with things like poetry? Was there a relative, a friend, a older or younger sibling that you're like, oh, I want to be like them, and they write poetry? What sparked that?
I got my feelings hurt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I got my feelings hurt. My 8th grade teacher introduced me to Nikki Giovanni, incredible poet. And it was the first time I like really saw my reflection on paper. And it was exciting. I read everything I could find, all this Nikki Giovanni work. And then I found more. Wait, there's Gil Scott-Heron. There's The Last Poets. I was like, this is Audre Lorde. I was like, what is happening? It was great. And I just enjoyed it. That was it. I didn't try to write any until I got my feelings hurt. And when my heart was broken, I didn't know what to do with it. Like, where do I put all of this? So I started writing, and then eventually I shared it with a couple of girlfriends who were excited and said, you should read that to so-and-so or such and such. Oh, there's a poetry reading. Come to that thing, read your poem. And that's what happened. And then the poetry was going really well. I was getting like $15 a set, and it was great. And then my friend Rich Medina and I were sitting outside of my house, and someone tried to shoot us. And it scared me so bad. It's terrible. It really just scared me. Yeah. So bad, so deeply, because I always felt like a ghetto flower. Yeah. I felt like everybody loved me, from drug dealers to crackheads. Like, I just felt loved. So, this stranger trying to harm us was overwhelmingly painful. So the next day I go to a poetry reading, and instead of reading the poem I had written all night long, I just started to sing.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know, I think I got to singing from just desperation to express myself, and the words weren't enough. I needed sounds too. So I sang, and the audience responded. They were silent, and then they erupted. And it felt so good. It felt so good. I was like, wow, I'm going to try that again next week.
That's an incredible story.
And then one thing begets another. you know. So then the reading of poetry and the singing, a director came to one of the poetry readings where I was also singing and said, "I think you're an actor." And I said, "Yes, I am."
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I said, "Yeah, I am." And he found out about a apprenticeship at a theater company, and I got the gig, and it was 16 hours a day. We hung lights, we built sets, we worked sound, we sewed costumes, cleaned toilets, mopped floors, like whatever it took to build that theater company, that's what we were there for. Sold tickets after working in the basement with the jackhammer, you know, like, yeah, but it's a great theater. It's called the Arden Theater Company in Philadelphia. It's fantastic. Very proud of it.
Awesome. A lot of what you're saying is this, it's not, I'm sure it's not all that drives you, but creativity and creative output being born out of pain, out of getting your feelings hurt, out of being in a dangerous situation and turning that into catharsis that other people can relate to, hopefully. It obviously reminds me of the last year and a half that the whole world's been living through a little bit, and quarantine and the waves of this COVID-19 that we're all facing. As an artist, and that's really one news cycle. There's also the election. There's Black Lives Matter marches across the country. There's the immigration debate that comes and goes. It's been a difficult year for news for all of us. And I'm always interested as an artist, or at least part of what you're doing is connecting with fans, audiences, listeners, to try to make sense of it all. How do you do that in a time like 2020 and 2021 when everything's a little more confusing than it usually is, but also a lot of your access to audiences is cut off, is turned into virtual access? Maybe just talk to that a little bit. Again, I hold you in such high regard as a creator, as an artist, and I'm interested to know how that challenge was met by you in the last year, how you addressed the topics that were trending in the news, to put it one way, and then how you connected with audiences around them.
Well, I started calling people, people I hadn't really spoken to, some. I started spending more time talking to friends because I have the time to really reconnect. I got home and I was happy to be home. I hadn't been home for longer than a few weeks in 20 years. I made a collage. Here's it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thanks. Folks I admire and respect are on the wall. I just started having these really great conversations and thought, I bet people would like to hear these. Maybe we could do a podcast. What do you think? And my girlfriend said, "Oh, okay." Not really thinking much about it, I don't think anyway. And then I contacted my partner. I was like, I think we should do a podcast. I'm at this age where I'm an auntie now, I've always wanted to be an auntie. Always. I couldn't wait to be this age where I could impart wisdom, not from just things I've read in books, but from experiences that I've had. And my girlfriends are, and very much similar. They've had a lot of experience, 20 years of friendship, 25 years being on the radio, 20 some odd years working as an artist. Aja is half of Kindred. Laia St. Clair has been on the radio for as long as I've known her. And I thought, let's have these conversations and record them for other people to hear. Because that's what I was lucky enough to spy on my aunties, my real aunties, drinking Manischewitz in the basement, listening to Millie Jackson. I heard all the stuff. I heard all the stuff, all the good stuff that I shouldn't have had any reason to be there, but great stories. Sometimes they cry. Sometimes they get angry and pace, and talk about it until they felt better. Sometimes it was sexual, and that was thrilling. It was all thrilling to listen to grown women be grown women. So that's what this podcast J.Ill is really all about.
It's fascinating also because I think in there somewhere is also a bit of the origin story too. We were talking about before we went live on this conversation about how my parents come from Ireland. I'm first generation. It's also just this legacy of storytelling. It's using words to work stuff out. And that seems to be how you guys have taken to the podcast medium too. This medium is interesting. It can scare some people for starters because there's so much creative freedom in podcasting. There are no rules of the road. An episode can be as long or as short as you'd like. You can publish it at once a month or once a day. When you guys approached that with that sort of blank slate of, look, as long as it's audio, we can do whatever we want and talk about whatever we want. Was that overwhelming or awesome or a little bit of both?
It was awesome and exciting. We're very lucky, I would say, that we have an opportunity to listen to our podcast before they go out and say, hey, I was just being free talking to my girlfriends. That is not something, that my husband would like, or my mom would like. That's awesome, but please, we've got to take that out, because we don't block ourselves when it comes to our conversations where they're really raw, but to protect the innocent, we'll erase some things, or mute them for later. But that part is still scary. And I think that's probably why I like it. I love the fact that we're not dressed up to do our podcast,
right?
That we're just talking, and that most of the time we're in our nightgowns or in our pajamas, no makeup, no hair done, none of those things. We're just really talking. We see each other when we talk, which makes it even better.
Interesting.
For us. Yeah.
Interesting. So it really is like the listener is eavesdropping in on a conversation you might be having anyway. It's interesting. I've heard this refrain with some of the best podcasters that they may launch a podcast because they're sort of curious about this medium that's hit mass reach. And what it turns into for them is a bit of a respite or a retreat every week. And it's not why they launched it, but it's what it became quickly for them. I was thinking about, we have an incredible couple podcasters named Bowen Yang and Matt Rogers. They do a great show called Las Culturistas. Bowen Yang, of course, on Saturday Night Live right now, is a really funny guy. And they were putting it in a similar way. They were sort of like, as our lives get a little crazier and we do more and more work and we get more and more work, this has turned into a bit of a retreat for us every week, a special moment every week for us to be able to stop down. It sounds like maybe it feels the same for you a little bit.
It does very much. We normally start our conversations by, whatever's happening. We don't force the conversation. There's 17 things to talk about, and then we just start talking, about whatever it is that's going on in our lives. And then typically the conversation will sway and we'll go, okay, let's record now. That's typically just how it goes. It's very comfortable, and I really have fallen for it. I wasn't sure how it was going to work, but my audience seems to really enjoy it. And I love being connected to these women the way that I am. I call them my sister friends, and they really are.
This has been incredible for me. I cannot thank you enough for taking time to talk to us today. It's funny, every now and then we put out a show where you can sort of feel that energy across our whole team of it being something very special. Some of that just comes from your legacy of just being that good all the time. A kid, not to embarrass you, but that some of that is that, but some of it is just when we started to hear these conversations, hear the tape, it was really special. So J.Ill is one of the best podcasts out there today. And I know you know this, but anybody listening in the sound of our voices or watching this should stop down this afternoon and take a listen, because it'll change you in good ways. Jill Scott, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. I deeply appreciate the partnership.
Thank you so much. This was great. Thank you.
And everybody else, thank you so much for hanging out with us for one more week. We will see you next week. Take care of yourselves for now.
You too. I can't wait to tell the girls.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Podversations is a production of iHeartRadio. You can find more from the biggest names in podcasting on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.